Hey, dude. You ready for UBCon this weekend?
I guess so.
What's got your bum, buddy? I got my cosplay together and everything.
I know, Cosplay of what? Old-timey Pharrell?
It's more of a disguise. I got a surprise for you.
I'm just kind of bummed because Dan Hundycz of DPHGames is going to be there. He's showing off the Gated Roulier and his Kickstarter for it's successful, and it's a great game, and I'd love to sit down and play it with him. I'd love to talk to him about it. I'd love to interview the guy, but I don't see why he would talk to us.
I got good news for you, Aaron.
Yeah?
I booked us an exclusive interview with him.
Really?
Yeah.
How?
Let's just say I got something up my sleeve.
Hey everybody, this is our first ever developer Kidnap. Don't tell anyone. Shh, I mean it. With us today is Dan Hundycz of DPHGames, and he's brought the Gate of Roulier, which is currently in Kickstarter, and we're super excited to talk to him about it. So Dan, why don't you tell the people at home who you are and how did you get into designing board games?
I had it with me when you got me here. But anyway, actually it kind of started by accident. There's a long history of developing LARPs and other things we won't get into, but I went out to buy a geocaching board game for a friend of mine for his birthday party, and there wasn't one, so I kind of made one, and we played it at the party, and people were like, you should do something with this, it's different. And that was 5 years ago, and we started the company, and since then I think this is game number 5.
So yeah, I was going to ask you about that. We weren't sure where Cash Me If You Can came from, but that answers that. So you got into it specifically because your friend wanted a certain type of game that wasn't available.
Yeah, so it ended up being kind of by accident. We went to a local convention, ran into a guy that used to work for a game company, and he helped us a lot. From there, that first year, you learn a lot. Made some mistakes, figure things out, and so that game is continually does well at Christmas time and at geocaching events that we go to throughout the summer.
All right, so the next game you came out with was Psych Warfare?
Psychological Warfare. So I was a counselor for years, and it's based on actual psychological theory, but the flavor of it is all sarcastic and humorous, so you get emotional baggage for the things you do. You have defense mechanisms you can use. You're trying to meet your 4 basic needs. You can get neuroses, and the flavor text is things like, you know what Freud would say about that, don't you? Nothing, he's dead. So that's psychological warfare.
So you followed up Psych Warfare with Cats.
Yeah, Cats, a sad but necessary, whoa, I almost forgot the name. Cats, a sad but necessary cycle of violent predatory behavior. You play cats in the backyard trying to catch, eat, steal birds. Badly punned named birds, like Scarlett Johansson and things like that. It's a secret selection simultaneous reveal game.
So how many cats do you have? Like, what inspired that type of...
Oh, I have 2, but if they don't get their 18 hours of sleep, they're entirely worthless. So I don't know if they chase a bird, but no, it came about through another series of strange events. So
Those are the best events, generically.
yeah. After that, we released Affliction.
Yes.
Salem 1692.
This is one of my favorite worker placement games. So can you tell us where this one came from?
This one came from 3 different things. One was there was another game that came out with the tagline that you play the good guys hanging witches. And I'm like, oh my God, that is so not what happened. At the same time, there was a series on Netflix that had the actual people's names and kind of went off the rails, where they're having covens and stuff in the woods. And the third thing might have been tactics in a recent election. I didn't say that, did I? So it started with, I knew we had to have accusations. I knew reputation would have something to do with it. I knew property would have something to do with it. And it evolved into a different kind of worker placement game in the sense that it's so interactive that you're vying for the same resources. And then the colonists all had abilities which created a situation where you had engine building. And the last piece that we knew we had to have was fear. We just were struggling how to get that to work. It went through at least five different iterations of how fear worked, and really happy with the ending of it, which was it disrupts other players' engines. You can shut down an individual character by using enough fear to shut them down.
Now, the game itself was fantastic, but the scoring mechanic at the end was kind of complex. And you later on put a score tracker essentially on the website to kind of simplify that. Was that an afterthought? Was that requested by the players?
No, we did it simultaneously. We thought it would be cool. And I don't know that it's too complicated. You're counting up the cards, you're counting up the properties, and you're counting up the families, and then you have a grievance card. But it's a fair amount to track, but it's more there because it generates a cool report.
It was, yeah, it's
and
great.
Then you can and you can post it out on Facebook right from there. So you can say, hey, I just played Affliction. I was supposed to protect this family, arrest this family, and I failed in protecting so-and-so, and I arrested these people. And I finished in whatever place.
That's actually a really, really great idea for a score tracker.
I loved the score calculator. It just made things so easy, and the fact that you could immediately share it is a great addition as well. So, Gate of Roulier. How devoted are you to our Dark Lord? And is that what commissioned you to create this game?
No. It started out, I wanted to do kind of a lighter, easier game to play, but
nothing as light as summoning demons from you.
I don't actually remember all the origins of this, but the Cthulhu theme was not intentional. It was not like oh God, the world needs another Cthulhu game. It just fit the theme so well in terms of what we were trying to do. And so as there were a couple of key turning points in them in the development, and I do say I can't remember what it looked like before the current iteration, where cards are only relatively good or bad based on the target you're going for, but that came from Simon Reed, who developed a game called I Spy that came out in 2015, and he's been helpful with all of our games. So once he said that they should be relatively good and bad, that helped the game a lot, because if you're stuck with a lousy card, eventually it comes around and that card is helpful.
Becomes useful, right?
Whatever side you're on. And then Insanity, we didn't have Insanity, which was an effort to keep the game simple, but basically is how do you have a Cthulhu game without Insanity?
It fits the theme very necessarily.
Yeah, and so again, Simon Reed suggested we had an Insanity track, and so you would get more and more Insanity points, and there was problems with it. And Simon's like, oh, people don't lose sanity in the same way. Why don't you just have them lose it all in different ways? And so the system of the cards came up and then evolved and got developed further.
Did you have any? Did you do any literary research on it, or are you a big fan of Lovecraft?
I'm not actually a big fan of Lovecraft. Did some research. Actually, had done research previously, because we were going to make a geocaching expansion. Because the name was so good, we wanted to do it just because Cache Thulu was such a good name.
I'm looking forward to that expansion.
So
my
we
goodness.
ran into problems with that in terms of the victory conditions, but so actually some of the information I had come from the research I'd done then. And then there's enough other Lovecraft experts out there that you don't have to go too far when you're when you're demoing the game and play testing the game, that they would give me information. And like one of the guys went out and he read the original story, and actually, if you read the original story, you'll see how far off all of these games are, because it ends. I think they hit Cthulhu with a propeller on one of their boats. He's not that big, so yeah. None of this. So the lore has evolved so far from the original parts that you can do whatever you want with it now, basically, I guess.
And the final game that I saw a little bit of at this con was Legacy at Sea. Can you tell us anything about that game? I understand it's been in the works for a while.
Yeah, well, actually, so Legacy at Sea has been in development for a while. It's gone through many iterations, just couldn't get it right. Large footprint, 2 layers of luck, which was too many, and so I finally think we've arrived at something that's much closer to what we'd like. So that's there as that's going to be coming down the road. We also have a game called Yokai Hunters, which is a kind of a puzzle style game where you swap tokens and create matching patterns. And then we were commissioned to do a camping game, and that's called Intense. Not intense, but intense.
Brilliant.
And oddly enough, if you back the gate of relay, you get another game called Agent 299.
299, yeah.
And Agent 299 is with 4 players, it's a 9-card game, and with 2 and 3 players, it's a 7-card game, and it's deceptively deep for having so few cards.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a little crazy. We were surprised how quickly that came together and how interestingly it plays. So
Looking forward to checking that out.
yeah.
Definitely.
What game would you say has had the most influence on you as a designer?
Huh. Well, I've been gaming for about 800 years. As a teenager, I was playing all the Avalon Hill military-style games, and they certainly had an impact. And then I was doing Cosmic Encounters in the 80s, and Steve Jackson's Crazy Paranoid game I'm blanking on right now. Can't believe I'm forgetting it. And we did Munchkin and all that stuff. So, gosh, influence. Well, starting out, it was much different than what it is now, because I'm exposed to it all the time, and so you're trying to play as many different things and find systems that work and that you're interested in. I would say, and then I did some computer gaming design back in the 80s, which was interesting, given the technology at the time.
You died of dysentery.
I would say diplomacy has a lot to do with many of them, so if you play that game and you still have friends, that's good. It can be vicious. They have to be the right people. I think I really love that kind of game in terms of it's the social interaction and the conversational twisting that I enjoy. And so it's odd that it took so long to come out with this kind of game, but probably diplomacy would be the number one influence on me. I don't know how much that pervades all of the games, but it's there.
So as a game designer, do you have any advice for, say, a fledgling game designer interested person?
Well, depends what you mean by fledgling. Fledgling in the design and the completion of the design, because there's 2 different elements. There's creating the games, and then there's manufacturing and selling the games, and the hard part is selling the games. In terms of creation of games is play test, and play test with as many different people as you can. Because if you have a core group, there's a style that they're going to use, and the game may work great for that style. But then as soon as you bring in someone else and they play it entirely differently, if it could break the game if you haven't anticipated that. And so a great story about the gated relay is we were out in Ohio, and it was near the end of the game, and this one guy is apologizing to me because he's like, I'm sorry, I'm going to try something, I'm sorry. And I'm like, go ahead, do it, you know. And his wife had an insanity where she had to vote yes, and he thought she was an investigator. And he said, well, I'm a cultist. I need the other 2 cultists to come forward, and we'll vote for an investigator, lose 2 hours off the clock, and we'll win the game. And I looked at him and I said, okay, well, I'm one of the cultists. And he says, well, I don't believe you. And it immediately fell apart because
Brilliant.
he had no way of knowing if I was or I wasn't. He just figured, well, the 2 cultists will come forward, we know they're cultists, and then we'll all do the vote. Well, you know, I don't know if it was the first time playing the game you would think of that, and I wasn't a cultist, I was an investigator. So the tricky part was switching people's minds halfway through the vote, because he then accused me of being a cultist. And they weren't sure if I was or not, but he thought I was. So I was like, yeah, go for it.
That's really clever.
You know, try it. And then I listened to everybody. Ultimately, I will make decisions about what to keep and not to keep. But crazy suggestions and, you know, and things that people object to, you want to listen to. Also, if something's not being used, like there's a card you have and no one ever uses it, then I go back and do the math, like what's the problem here? It's not attractive enough, or everything else is more attractive, or there's some problem that this element isn't being used. And then lastly, when you're sort of in the final stages, I want to hear one of 2 things. Either, well, I had a problem with this, or this, or this, or it's not my style, or what my issues are with this game, or I want to buy this, or where can I buy it?
Right.
Not, well, that was fun. I mean, that was fun is okay, but there's a huge difference between that was fun and I'm going to separate you from your money, or in your case, you from a lot of money. So that's where you got to get to. And so, talking about Legacy at Sea, I have people from 3 years ago saying, when is that coming out? We loved it. And I'm like, well, no, it's not. It's just not there. It's got to be great because it's so competitive. The game,
Especially now.
Yeah, it's flooded. That they have to be standout.
All right. Well, thank you so very much. You've been a wonderful first hostage. I mean, guest.
You said guest.
A guest. I meant guest. You've been a great guest. Thank you so much.
In fact, our favorite guest.
Yes, absolute favorite guest.
Well, if you end the series right now, I can maintain that title.
Dan Hundycz of DPHGames, thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me.
We might return you to your family. It's going to be a coin toss.
Hey, friends, it's your old pal CJ. What, you didn't know we were friends? I'm not hiding in your bushes for the fun of it. Want to see some videos? Click over here. If you want to see more of us, subscribe, and we'll tell you when we're coming.